Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Contemporary Issue Sunday School class. We're a little light on attendance today because of everything that's going on. A big Broncos game and other things. So much going on. In fact, we have a few announcements at the beginning here. Want to let my friend Steve O'Neill go first and promote his hockey.
I thought he was
Event.
Moses with his staff.
Let's get the other end right. So men's hockey, January 31st. I'd like to invite all the men, grandsons, uncles to go ahead and join us then. But the information is on the church website. Buy your tickets by this Thursday because they're releasing the rest of the unsold tickets then. So please join us. We'd love to have you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a great reminder. There are other sports besides football in America. Believe it or not.
Yes.
Well, we are going to talk today about the life of Jimmy Carter. We saw, everybody imagine saw some of the funeral events this week about Jimmy Carter and all the praise for him and the evaluation of his presidency. And so we're going to take a few minutes to discuss that. But first, I want to welcome our Zoomers and ask you to put yourself on mute when you're not speaking. And we are broadcasting this for, recording this for future playback on YouTube. And with that, other announcements. Good class on the Bonhoeffer sermon series starts tonight at 6:30. Zooming, Vicki and I are going to do that. We heard at least 100 people that are joining that, so it should be a good class if anybody's interested. Also, the Netflix movie I thought was very good. Vicki and I watched that on the life of Bonhoeffer.
It's from Netflix.
On Netflix.
Prime also has one. There's one that's a
And Prime.
documentary, and then there's one that's actually an enactment like a movie.
Ooh, okay.
But then
Okay.
they're both on Prime.
I'm thinking of the documentary
Yeah.
that really
Yeah, I saw that.
followed his life and how he was conflicted about being part of the plot to kill Hitler and how he reconciled that with his faith. Was that a just war issue, or how do you deal with something like that? Very interesting.
What was the name of the documentary on Netflix?
Just Bonhoeffer.
Just Bonhoeffer, I think.
Just Bonhoeffer.
Yes, but dealt a lot with faith and how do you live out your faith in very trying times. So want to give that a little promotion too. Okay, and also want to promote Frank in the back. Frank Atwood and his wife Maureen are having a potluck on January 24th from 6 to 8:30, and we are invited to that if anybody would like to. There are little flyers here that Frank will give out, and so we're all invited to that. Thank you, Frank. And anything else? Yes, Larry.
I'm teaching AARP driver safety here next Saturday from 8:45 to 1. If any of you want to learn how to drive safely and get a discount on your insurance, I'm in the directory.
Great idea. Great idea. Okay, we always want to drive safer. That's right. Okay, before I start, I've got a little, some slides to show of Jimmy and talk about his life. But let me ask first, has anybody here ever met Jimmy Carter, or some folks in the back? And tell us, how did you do that? Did you go to his church,
No.
Sunday school class, or?
Texas, Wesleyan University, in 1990. He was there to speak. I was living in Fort Worth at the time.
Uh-huh.
And so I left my family and I said, look, the president's gonna be in town. You know, the ex-president would still call me president.
Sure.
I said, I've got to be there. So I went down, listened to the speech. He came off of the stage and actually met some of the people that were in the audience, did some handshaking. I got to shake his hand. My God, I wish I'd have had a cell phone.
Get a selfie with him, sure. Sure. Well, how neat, you actually got to meet him. Neat. Okay, other short stories.
Playing flights on the way back to Denver.
On a plane to
He
Denver.
was with a passenger on the plane, and he walked through the entire plane.
Yeah.
Shook everyone's hand and said hello.
I've heard more than one story about that's what he does on airplanes. He walks through and meets every person and shakes their hands. Yes. Okay, and we have one other story too. One of our class members, Don Kuski, is a pilot, and Don couldn't be here today, but he wrote a little, just a couple paragraphs about when he flew Jimmy Carter somewhere. And his wife Susan is here, and so she's going to just read what Don wrote about when he flew Jimmy Carter somewhere.
Yes, I can do this. And this is a model of the plane that he would have flown Jimmy Carter on. It is the smallest corporate jet that Don flew, but Don always said it was a hot rod. Because it could go so fast. And some of you will understand this, what he has written here, but I do not. The airplane Mach was 0.865. That is 86% speed of sound. And mathematicians can figure that out. I cannot. Yeah. Don had a wonderful life, and we both did, with his career as a corporate pilot. Mainly, he flew for the Bell system, but later he flew for somebody else and flew all over the world. The only place he did not go ever was the Pacific Rim. But he flew this airplane through every country in South America. So his career was a good one. This is what he says. On September 21st, 1987, Northwestern Battle Flight Department departed on a flight from OMA to TCL, Omaha to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, on a deadhead flight. I don't know if you know what deadhead means, but other than picking off dead flowers, it means that there are no passengers on board. Okay. Let's see, in a Falcon 10, 8 passengers. There was no flight attendant on this airplane. Corporate jet to pick up former U.S. President Jimmy Carter and transport him to Omaha with 2 other passengers. Don did not remember the name of the other passenger, but one of them was the Secret Service. The purpose of the trip was not known at this time, but since then, my son has done research, and I'll be able to tell you what Jimmy Carter did when he was in Omaha. Okay, approximately 10 days prior to this flight, the scheduled flight crew for the day, Don Kuski and Lanny Anderson, were screened by the Secret Service. There was some questioning and background checks were made. And I don't know what all those were, but I know they needed to know his flight, if he was a good pilot, let's put it that way. And so he explained to them that in his first corporate job, they had sent him to American Airlines school. So he had an airline transport license, the same as the commercial pilots do. So I guess that was good. The flight was scheduled for 10 p.m. departure, and the airplane arrived at 8:10 on a very dark night. Even the ramp was dimly lighted. The airplane was not equipped with an APU. I don't know if you know what that means, but that's an auxiliary power unit. So it was dark as the passengers arrived. The crew met the passengers, one being Secret Service, as they drove onto the ramp near the airplane. As they departed, their cars and luggage began being removed. The crew members picked up the hanging bag, and before picking up the small suitcase, Mr. Carter very politely said, "I will carry my own luggage." He greeted us and thanked us for picking them up. For people that ride on private jets, they usually don't carry their own luggage. That's just the way it goes. but Jimmy Carter did, and Donna was so impressed. Once we departed into the black abyss with very little ground lighting, about 2,000 feet in the air, and cleaning up the after takeoff checklist. I don't know if you know what that means, but before a pilot takes off, he has a checklist. And once they're in the air, he also has a checklist. So that's what he's talking about. The bright light on the instrument panel, generator failure. Now we have two, I don't know what that means. Now we have two, I mean, we must have two generators. I don't know what that means. Well, they do have two
Don
engines.
told me previously, one of the engines went out, and so
Oh.
they would have had to turn around, but they didn't in this case.
Right, it says, if all else fails, we're down for emergency lighting with 20-minute limit. And the passengers will be in a very dim lighting. As the emergency checklist is called for, the thinking is we have an hour and a half flight, weather is good, voltage is normal. Checklist is going to say, if it does not reset, consider landing. Wow. We have to divert and land, and this is going to make the headlines. Former president. We follow the checklist and ... The generator resets, all back to normal. Rest of the flight was good. No one came forward asking for drinks or snacks. Again, is not usual on a private aircraft. At the destination, Mr. Carter carries his luggage into the hangar lobby and shakes our hands. Gee, I'm glad I voted for this man. On September 22nd, they returned him to Atlanta, Georgia, Peachtree, DeKalb. And our son found, by going through some of the World Herald, Omaha's newspaper, their archives, that what Jimmy Carter was doing there. First, he spoke at a breakfast at the Civic Auditorium that was by invitation only. And he was talking about it's all to do with Creighton University, and that's what he was discussing there. And then in the afternoon, 12:30 actually, he went to Creighton, and his title for that speech was A Conversation with Jimmy Carter. And at that, Jimmy Carter was presented with an honorary Doctor of Laws degree for his work in promoting human rights and international peace.
Thank you for sharing, Susan. Okay,
Steve,
yes, sir, Riggs, go ahead.
I actually had the opportunity to meet Jimmy as well. I was a student at the University of Georgia and interning with Sam Nunn, the senator there in DC. Jimmy came in to the office there with all the interns, with Herman Talmadge and Sam, and sat down with us. He was actually there as a governor of Georgia, not as president, and was looking after his peanut interests at the time. What I remember most about that was his smile. He had the greatest, wonderful smile when he came in to see us.
Nice, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been touched by him. Okay, I want to run through a little slide presentation with you and tell you a little about his life, focusing on some of the things you may not have heard before. So I'm sharing, can you see now on Zoomers, see my slide share? Thumbs up, anybody? Can see it? Nope. Let's see, Doug, you saw it? Okay, good. Okay, I'm just gonna run through his life quickly with some pictures and some information here. James Earl Carter Jr. was born 1924 in Plains, Georgia, at called the Wise Sanitarium Hospital, where his mother worked as a nurse. He was the first U.S. president born in a hospital. Until that time, it was most common to be born in homes. Jimmy Carter's youth was marked by his family moving several times and finally settled on a dirt road in nearby Archery, which was entirely populated by impoverished African-American families, 55 Black families, and the Carters were the only white family. And Jimmy says that he never really knew the difference between Blacks and whites because he played without any self-consciousness with his Black friends. And his family eventually had 3 more children after Billy: Gloria, Ruth, and Billy. Remember Billy Beer?
Yeah.
Poor Billy is known for his Billy Beer. We remember that. Jimmy Carter had a good relationship with his parents, even though his mother was often absent as a nurse, working long hours, and his father was staunchly pro-segregation. But he allowed Jimmy to play with the Black children without any discrimination. Jimmy Carter was also an enterprising teenager, and his father gave him an acre of their land, their farmland, and Jimmy grew and packaged and sold his own peanuts.
Oh, wow.
So he started with that. At Plains High School, he graduated valedictorian from his high school. Doesn't say how many, but he was a good student from the start. May not have been a very big class, but he was a good student, and he dreamed of attending the U.S. Naval Academy. He started studying engineering at Georgia Southwestern College, and then got a nomination to the Naval Academy, where he met Rosalind Smith, a friend of his sister. The two wed shortly after his graduation. He graduated 60th out of 800 midshipmen with a Bachelor of Science degree in engineering. The Carters then lived in Virginia and Hawaii and Connecticut when he was in the Navy. And he did officer training for submarine duty and served aboard the USS Pomfret, for those of us who were in the Navy. And
It was a diesel-powered submarine.
a diesel-powered submarine.
Executive
Right.
officer and engineering officer, I believe.
Yes. And I highlight was when Jimmy Carter's team that he led as a nuclear engineer went to the Canadian Chalk River Laboratory that was having an accident, a radioactive water flooding accident where the reactor core was ruined. Carter and his team were in protective gear and were lowered individually into the reactor where it was melting down. Jimmy was there for 90 seconds. And he said for years after that, his urine tested positive for radioactivity. But his job was to turn a single screw in 90 seconds, and then he got out again. So, and it also marked his interest in reducing the atomic bomb and the development of the neutron bomb. His plans in the Navy changed when his father got sick and died of pancreatic cancer, which 3 of his siblings also died of. Genetic interaction there. And so he had to come home. Jimmy came home from active duty and took over the family peanut business. And it proved very difficult. After settling the debts from his father's estate, Jimmy and Rosalind had no money and lived in public housing in Plains, Georgia for a time. Transitioning from the Navy to farming was difficult, but they actually took classes in agriculture, and Rosalind learned how to do accounting and manage the family's businesses. After racial tensions inflamed in the late 40s and 50s, Jimmy got especially interested in politics. And so he went into the state legislature, and as we know, was eventually elected governor. He then ran in the 1966 gubernatorial election. He ran against former governors and conservative segregationist Lester Maddox. Maybe some of us will remember, yes. And Jimmy declared in 71 that the time is over for racial discrimination. shocking the crowd and causing many segregationists who supported his candidacy earlier to feel betrayed. Carter was reluctant to engage with fellow politicians who were segregationists, which made him unpopular in his area. Despite a cool reception in the legislature, he was able to do things as governor, such as merging 300 state agencies into 22 and helping save a lot of state money. And so then came 1974, and he announced in this picture in December of 74 his presidential aspiration, and his themes were domestic equality, optimism, and change. People said, "Who is this new guy? Jimmy who?" And so he made that one of his campaign slogans, Jimmy who, and then he explained who he was.
Let me just put in a publicity. Andrew Young spoke at the cathedral service from a chair, but this is maybe certainly one of the top 5 books on the racial issues in America.
Mhm.
And the 25th anniversary edition is coming out, or has come out. But this book is almost unparalleled in terms of the history of the civil rights movement. And he of course, was closely friended with Jimmy Carter. So I'll pass that around.
Just a very quick review of how he won, being a no-name candidate at that time. Carter's strategy was to go to the Iowa and New Hampshire early primaries as much as he could and get his name out. He visited 37 states and delivered over 200 speeches, more than anyone else in the campaign at that time. He tacitly conceded certain areas to Wallace and other candidates, but he swept them as a moderate when it became clear that George Wallace couldn't win in certain regions. So he was very strategic on what he did. He was inaugurated as the 39th president in 1977. And on his first day as president, he issued a executive order declaring amnesty for all Vietnam War era draft evaders. Do we remember that?
Yeah.
I didn't really remember that. Yes, which caused a lot of question at that time. Jimmy was quick in not conforming to Washington's rules. He avoided phone calls from members of Congress and sometimes verbally insulted them, which made him not too popular in the beginning either. He was also unwilling to return political favors when some congressmen said, "You have to play ball here in Congress, even though you're not in Washington, even though you're not from here." His negativity in those early days led to some frustration passing legislation that he wanted. But he said it's inevitable that when an outsider comes in, there's going to be conflict. So a rift ensued between the White House and Congress for a while. And Carter noted that the Democratic Party's liberal wing also opposed his policies. And he believed it was because Ted Kennedy wanted to be president also. And so he had challenges with his own party. But then he went on to do so many good things. He embraced healthcare reform, but it did not get passed in 1977. He supported universal national health insurance in 1977 before it became popular. We know he went on to have a great interest in the Middle East, and he had the Camp David Accord, in which Egypt formally recognized Israel for the first time after 5 wars in the past between Egypt and Israel. And then we know that both the Israeli and the Jewish leaders were assassinated not long after that. They paid the price for trying to pursue peace.
Sadat did as well, right?
And Sadat, yeah, Sadat and Begin.
Okay.
both assassinated by extremists in their own countries who did not want peace.
As he was watching a parade, Sadat.
Sadat
He was in
was.
grandstand and own troops marching by. Several of them broke ranks and
Yes.
shot him.
And Jimmy Carter said afterwards, if these two leaders could give their lives for peace, then I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to trying to promote peace in the world. Was one of his comments. And then we all remember, of course, the Iran hostage situation, which came about after Jimmy gave the Shah of Iran, allowed him to come into America for medical treatment. And when the Shah left, that caused many of the young people in Iran to hate America and invaded the embassy and took 44 people hostage and held them until Ronald Reagan was elected, and then freed them on the day Reagan took the oath of office.
Did you have a rescue that went bad?
Did have a rescue, yes. Jimmy
That
did
was,
try
like, really against
a secret rescue.
Yeah.
And of course, his other challenges were a bad economy due to high inflation at that time, and he tried to take care of that by appointing Paul Volcker as chair of the Federal Reserve and said, do what you need to do if it includes raising interest rates to bring inflation under control. And so there is the feeling that Jimmy tried to do the right thing by that. And then the gas shortage also. So even though there were things that Carter did right, he was not able to overcome some of those very important negative challenges. And so historians across the board generally rate him as a less than average successful president. And so we know he went on to become a more than successful post-president. So with that, I want to stop here and ask about your memories of his life, and that before we talk about his views on religion and things. What do you think about when you think about Jimmy Carter?
Habitat for Humanity.
Habitat for Humanity, yes.
Naval officer.
Naval officer.
Guinea worm.
Guinea worm, yes. Yes, we'll talk about that a little bit too. Frank.
As a political strategist, having visited America's Georgia, you discovered that when he announced his presidential ambitions, he had three different plane stops. He announced it in New York, the media center there. Americas, he announced it, and then in Los Angeles the same day, using the time zones in order to be prime time announcement. And I thought, no wonder you became president. You thought ahead.
Yes, yes, that's one of the things they say he was really good at, was thinking ahead and trying new things. One of those is shown in this picture. In 1979, he had solar panels installed at the White House, and he also established the Department of Education and Energy, put the U.S. on the path to greater energy security. And that was not popular at the time. Ronald Reagan took the solar panels off of the White House a couple of years after that. Didn't read why, but they didn't last long. Carter also deregulated and transformed the entire air and ground transportation system and other regulatory agencies, and reduced regulations, and was given credit for that. He deserves more credit in retrospect than most people give him, some admirers say, hiring Paul Volcker to help the economy despite the hit that Carter took to his reputation with that. In July of 1979, Jimmy Carter described the country as being in a spiritual malaise. Remember that term?
Yes.
Malaise, meaning a spiritual crisis of confidence. And he said, if we don't come out of this, it could destroy the social and political fabric of America. And others say that Jimmy helped that in different ways, but was not successful because of the time that he lived and the things that came up, the storm of issues that came up at once, and that maybe at a different time, he would have been a more successful president, been able to do more with legislation and the economy, but that he did the best that he can. Okay.
Wasn't it said once that a real prophet is not popular in his own time?
In his own time, very true. But after, yes, go ahead.
I just think, so I was like, I'm Amy's age, I think I'm right there. We lived outside DC at the time. And, we saw her going to church one day. So saw the brand, but, I think maybe for people in my generation, his presidency increased the cynicism that you can't be a good person and president. You have to sacrifice your values if you're actually going to get stuff done.
Good point.
Just sad.
Yes, yes. But he fought against that cynicism and he said, I will always tell the truth. And as far as we know, he did. He lived up to that. We know shortly after he was defeated in 1980 by Ronald Reagan after one term, that he pretty quickly started his work with Habitat for Humanity around the world, and including in Denver, was one of the many cities. He and Rosalind would spend a week, a year at some city doing Habitat for Humanity. Anybody here done that with them here?
Not with her.
Or just Habitat in general? Yes, we've got about 12 people or so. Great.
Globeville project.
Globeville area. Yes. And then Jimmy also started the Carter Center in Atlanta, which has now 200 employees and 200 employees in Atlanta and 3,500 around the world. And it helps with monitoring elections, talking about negotiating war solutions when the people around in these countries cannot do that together, and eliminating disease, including this guinea worm in Africa that killed thousands, and now there's only 12 or 14 cases a year, they said too. So pretty amazing things that he did. Rosalind, they were married 77 years. She had interest of mental health when she was the first lady and afterwards, and helped with the family business also, but I don't think she had a career outside of that I read. Here's a little picture of their ranch house in Plains, Georgia, that they built or bought in the 1960s and lived in ever since. And it was valued now but at $269,000, less than the Secret Service cars that are parked out front. Yes, thought that was a good thing. And here's the Carter Presidential Library in Atlanta. I have a friend who visited there recently, and he said, I visited the Carter Presidential Library and bought his official memoir at his time, telling about his time in office. The gift shop suggested, at that time, Jimmy was around there. The gift shop suggested I walk across the parking lot to the Carter Center where Jimmy had an office. They said, if he is there, he will come out and sign your book and shake your hand. But he was not there when I went into the Carter Center, and I was disappointed I didn't get to shake his hand that day. I thought that was a good little commentary. And this is a picture of the Carter Center in Atlanta, where they have their 200 employees and do that work around the world. Has anybody here ever been there? Linda, you went to the Presidential Library?
No.
To the Carter Center? I was telling my wife Vicky, I wish that we thought of it to do this years ago, go take a trip to Atlanta and go to those places and go to his Sunday school class, because they say his Sunday school class, at his little church, buses of tourists would pull up to the church and park, and he would have the biggest room there, or a fellowship hall, and hundreds of people would come and sit in on his Sunday school class.
Yeah, they said they would line up early.
Line up early, hours before, to get into the church where Jimmy was going to be teaching. From a young age, Jimmy Carter showed a deep commitment to Christianity. He taught Sunday school at the Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains. And he differed, of course, with the Southern Baptist in his views. And so he left the Southern Baptist Church and joined another part of the Baptist denomination, American Baptist. Yes. So he remained a Baptist, but not a Southern Baptist. And he said that he was greatly influenced when he was young by a sermon in which the pastor asked, if you were arrested for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? That was one of the early things that really touched him. He said, I had to split from the Southern Baptists because I personally feel that women should play an equal role in the service of Christ in the church and in society. He remained a member of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship also, and his support for equal rights caused many evangelical conservatives to leave the Democratic Party at that time also. Let me read to you 11 interesting facts, just really quick, that you may not have known about Jimmy Carter. The first one I mentioned, he was the first president to be born in a hospital. Another one is he was the only president to be using his nickname of Jimmy, not his official name, and it showed his humility. He did that even when he was inaugurated. He used a Bible and had the people swear him in using his nickname of Jimmy. Bill Clinton and Joe Biden also had nicknames, but they chose to be sworn in using their full names. Jimmy and Rosalind were married for 77 years, and Jimmy said that his mother knew that he wanted to marry Rosalind, and she said, but you're 21 and she's 18. Isn't that a bit young to be married at the time? And after leaving the White House, they moved into a home in the 1960s, their 2-bedroom ranch house, which is now valued at $269,000. Jimmy Carter installed solar panels in 1979, ahead of his time, hoping to make the U.S. more sustainable in energy production. And the panels were removed in 1986 by Reagan. Jimmy Carter's campaign jet was called Peanut One, and he used that in 1976 on his campaign trails. And Jimmy Carter named more judicial appointments of minority people, including women judges, than any other president to that time or since. But as a Christian, he struggled with abortion and same-sex marriage early on. And he said that I do not think that Jesus would have approved of abortion, but I will uphold the law of the land, Roe versus Wade, and he did that ever since, but also promoting adoption and other things that can help reduce abortions. And finally, a funny one that you didn't know was in 1977, he visited Buckingham Palace and he gave a kiss on the cheek to the Queen Mother, and violating the etiquette of that time in England. And so the Queen Mother was a little confused and said afterwards, that man kissed me on the lips. And that is an effrontery. And so the British tabloids accused Mr. Carter of breaching royal protocol by kissing the Queen Mother on the lips. Jimmy Carter said, that never happened. I gave her a peck on the cheek.
Not there with the tongue.
That's right. That's right. I want to stop sharing here. Yes, just a second. Okay, there we go. Okay, yes, Eric.
The television documentary on Carter said that the Ford people running against him didn't have any ammunition until he gave that Playboy interview and admitted to lust in his heart. And that closed the gap between him and Ford, so that barely was able to win.
Yes, I heard him explain in interviews that the Playboy magazine reporter asked him if he'd ever lusted after women, and he said, "Yes, of course I have. Every man does." And then he said, "I tried to explain that, and he just didn't understand that, and nobody had said that to that time, especially a presidential candidate had been so blunt in admitting that."
Boy, have times changed.
If times change, that's right, Linda. That's for
Miss
sure.
Rosalind wasn't featured in the centerfold that month, huh?
Why did he give a interview to Playboy magazine in the first place? Some people ask. Yeah,
He's
but
trying to appeal to younger voters.
it was a younger voter appeal, much like podcasts are today, when the candidates.
Like Trump
Go
on
on.
TikTok or something.
Yes, it was trying to do that. Okay, we've got 15 minutes left. Other comments or questions, observations about Jimmy's life? Yes, Ann.
I wonder if anybody saw last night, it was totally by chance with me, a eulogy done by Jimmy's grandson.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it did. I thought it was exceptionally well done. And I don't usually react like that, but I was actually tearful. He just did an exceptionally fine job. Tall, handsome man, 49 years old, grandson. For those who didn't see it, it goes to YouTube. You should pull it up because it speaks to so much of what you're sharing with us right now, Steve.
Was that the one where the grandson said he got a call one day from Jimmy when Jimmy just got his cell phone?
Yes.
The day that he got his cell phone and the grandson answered and Jimmy said hello, and then Jimmy said, "Who's this?" And the grandson said, "It's me, Chip, your grandson." And Jimmy said, "I didn't call you. I'm trying to make a picture. I'm trying to take a picture."
Eulogies were really good.
Yeah, they really were.
Eulogies
From
for
the
them
funeral.
Before they die.
Yes, yes.
The hospice for so long.
Yes, it was nice to see. It made me think that if Protestants had saints like the Catholics do, Jimmy would probably be one. I would think if we based it on service and good moral character. Pardon me, Don?
Did he do any miracle?
Did he do it? No, he didn't probably do any miracles, but you never know.
Live to 100.
Well, the guinea worm is darn near one.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep. Yep. Christine?
I thought it was interesting that he developed this friendship with his political rival, Jerry Ford. That they were rivals, that they became good friends and then agreed to have each other's, say each other's eulogy.
Yes.
And that's significant that they were Republican, Democrat, that they were able to have that close relationship.
Yes. Mhm. Unusual today.
Yes.
Probably wouldn't happen too much today. Okay, let me read to you 6 lessons from Jimmy Carter that was posted, I think, in the New York Times by a columnist. Number 1, retirement is the time to serve others. Retirement today can last for decades, like 45 years, like it did for Jimmy in some cases. offering us an opportunity to stay active and engaged and to serve others. We won't probably win a Nobel Peace Prize as Carter did at age 81, but we can do a lot of good in the world, and there's nothing stopping us from volunteering in our own local ways. Jimmy and Rosalind did that well into their 90s and remained effective across the world well into their 90s. Number two, downsize like the Carters did, or never upsize in the first place. Tens of millions of retirees worry about money. Carters had no concern with money because they frankly had a lot from Jimmy's many books that he wrote and were continually successful during his retirement. But since 1961, they lived in a small ranch house in Plains, Georgia that he built himself. By contrast, the average house in the US sells for $434,000, as opposed to his $269,000. Number three, live below your means. The Carters were known for enjoying potluck meals with neighbors, often eating off paper plates and shopping at the Dollar General store, which was a half-mile from their house. They were obviously not only living within their means, but below them. Studies show that acquiring things and being materialistic isn't associated with long-term happiness, and the Carters proved that to be true in their own case. Number five, reach out to others and stay humble. Jimmy Carter was known for being a humble person. When he would walk on an airplane, down the airplane aisle, he would shake hands with the fellow passengers in every seat when it was available to him. He always flew commercial, except for the time he went with Don, in certain cases. But he often flew commercial, often with no one other than one Secret Service agent accompanying him. Young people often had no idea who he was, but were still thrilled to meet a former president when he would introduce himself. His modesty and generous gestures illustrated his civility and good treatment of total strangers with decency and respect. Keep the faith, number six. In addition to his books, Jimmy Carter taught Sunday school at his Baptist church, not only while he was president a few times, but before the onset of the coronavirus and afterwards. In one of his books, 2018's Faith, Carter writes how his faith has guided and sustained him through many ups and downs. This most famous senior citizen showed us that staying active and engaged in living out your faith is not only rich and productive, but is what Christ intended for us to do. Well, that was a good column. Any other thoughts about Jimmy? Well, we've got 9 minutes left. Yes, Eileen.
One-time thing, his daughter, I think.
A children's book. Okay.
He wrote 42 books.
32, yeah, 30 some books. You know, said he loved to write and read. He was kind of a Renaissance man. So he said he did woodworking, skiing, poetry, all kinds of things. Yes, Ann, go ahead.
I just wondered, does anybody in the room know anything about his children? Oh, I know nothing other than Jason was the grandson that did this eulogy that I witnessed, but does anybody know anything about his children and grandchildren?
A little bit right here, Ann. Thank you for bringing that up.
Funny that you asked.
He had 3 sons and a daughter. The oldest son, Jack, now 77 years old, followed in his father's military footsteps and served in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam War. Jack then worked for Invesco, an investment company, and was on the Chicago Board of Trade. He later ran for a U.S. Senate seat in Nevada, but lost to the Republican incumbent. The next son, Chip, age 74 now, was born in Honolulu when they lived there. And he got his nickname Chip because it means Hawaiian for baby. Along with his brothers, Chip worked for the family peanut business and was later involved in his father's political career. And then he served as president of Friendship Force, a nonprofit, another one, founded by Jimmy and Rosalind in 1977. And the youngest son, Jeff Carter, now 72, studied geography and computer cartography, and later co-founded a company called Computer Mapping Consultants. Today, Jeff's been living with Parkinson's disease for some time, is living independently. And Amy Carter, we remember little Amy. She spent her years growing up in the fishbowl of the White House. She later became involved with political activism, and in the 80s protested CIA recruitment and apartheid. In 1985, her father said he was proud of Amy's activism, and she has 2 children, a son with an ex-husband and another son with a current husband.
And how old is she now?
It did not say here, but she would be in her 50s probably. I think I saw Miss Mason.
Quick question.
Sure.
I think it was Amy pushing somebody around in a wheelchair.
Yeah, 60s.
But who was that in the wheelchair? Was that her current husband or
Yes.
someone else or? is
Yes.
Not sure. I don't know. Okay. Sure. A little bit about Habitat for Humanity. Has made a significant global impact since its founding in 1976. Helped over 46 million people, provides safe and affordable housing. Ownership helps families that achieve financial stability. And surveys show 57% of families have more savings and 48% feel more connected to their communities when they move into these areas. Under child development, studies indicate children growing up in stable, affordable homes perform better. And Habitat's work helps stimulate local economies wherever they've been built. Habitat has had 700,000 plus volunteers annually to build homes and is still going strong. Thank you, Steve. Yeah.
I have a question about
Yes.
the Habitat. When we did it, the people that we were building the home for worked right alongside of us. Is that still?
Yeah, they have to put in 250 hours of work, not necessarily on their house, but on a
Somebody's
house.
They can
Yeah.
have their friends and neighbors take up some of that 300 hours as well. Doesn't have to be there.
Desperately need our help.
Yes, somebody want to comment on Zoom? Okay, that's okay. I want to give our Zoomers a chance to comment or question. If you have a story or a memory. Okay. Yes, Larry.
I was on the Habitat electrical team for 15 years. Here in Denver, we had a group of licensed electricians and apprentices who wired every house that Habitat built. We were the only Habitat organization in the country that had that group. And they bought the material, and then once a quarter, the supervisor would bake chocolate chip cookies. That was our pay.
That was your pay. Amazing. Okay. I'm trying to think, give me just a second here, if I have anything else I wanted to share with you. Do you think we'll see the likes of Jimmy Carter's post-presidency again? Do you think it's unlikely?
There have to be people out there that aren't a high profile, that, I mean, maybe don't do things on that scale, but.
Sure.
But they're good people that have done a lot, that don't get this kind of recognition.
Yes,
There have to
yes.
be.
It's one little comment I had. Sure, go ahead.
One of the comments that I loved, someone talked about complimenting him on all the things that he had achieved and done in his life. And his reply to that was, Well, apparently the one thing I've not learned how to do is how to die.
Oh. That's good. He had a good sense of humor. We've got 4 minutes left. I want to read to you a little bit about a comment he made on the show Fresh Air, NPR show many years ago, explaining that after he was defeated by Ronald Reagan, he wasn't sure at all what he was going to do in his post-presidency. He hadn't even thought about it. He said, but as soon as I got out and started talking with other people about what ex-presidents can do, he said, I learned that there was a tremendous need around the world for someone who had been president of the United States to help with issues that they couldn't help themselves. He said, at the Carter Center now, we monitor all conflicts in the world. And when he said this in the 90s, he said there were 30 major wars going on at this time. All of them are civil wars with horrible devastation. Somalia was one, Sudan was another. The problem is those civil wars cannot be addressed except on very rare occasions by the United Nations or the US government, because it's totally inappropriate for any representative of the UN to communicate with a revolutionary group that's trying to overthrow a current government. So most of those civil wars go unaddressed and even unrecognized by America and the developed world. This opened up a chance for us to go in as mediators and talk to revolutionaries and government people in these countries and offer solutions. He said I didn't have any restraint on me because I was not president anymore, but I was famous enough to be welcomed into these African countries and meet with their rulers who wanted the prestige of meeting with an ex-American president. And if they were tired of war or looking for a solution, we often were able to give expertise on how they could come to a resolution. So he said that led to his founding of the Carter Foundation and all the things they did with monitoring elections and trying to resolve other places. Yes, Susan, I see your hand.
I think that one of his greatest accomplishments was spearheading the eradication of the guinea worm, because that has, that was so monumental and it has such long-term impact on so many people.
Yes, he said he was very proud of that. It was a waterborne disease in Africa from dirty water, and nobody was paying attention to that at all. Okay, we're about out of time. Any final thoughts? All righty. Well, thank you very much for coming today. Let's say a prayer for Jimmy Carter and his family. Lord, we thank you for his example, for his life. Help us to do the same and to serve as he showed us how. Please be with his family and be with those, please, in California in this trying time, for everyone out there also. We thank you for all your blessings. Amen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's great to hear about the dog story.